The primary function of maps is to record and communicate navigational and geographical information, but they can be so much more. Maps contain the story of the map makers, their lives, what was important to them, and their idea of reality. Maps also reveal what was happening on the world scene, economically, politically, and culturally. Maps can be a time machine, taking us back into our history. The Pivotal Points exhibit at the Littleton Museum is the story of the exploration and development of the Trans-Mississippi West. The exhibit lets the museum showcase its fine collection of maps and materials documenting Western migration in America. The collection grew out of the museum's mission of telling the story of life in Littleton from settlement to the present day. To understand Littleton's story, one must start with the settlement of the West.
This exhibit is called Pivotal Points because we thought that we would focus on some of those pivotal points that were used by explorers and mappers as they came out west, and maps that showed areas of importance and showed how the West was formed and how the different states and territories were formed early on.
Over the years, the Littleton Museum has built one of the top 3 public collections of maps in Colorado. The Pivotal Points exhibit gives the public the rare opportunity to see and compare historic maps side by side in one location. Displaying the maps presented a special challenge that curator of exhibits Bill Hastings enjoyed.
Several months ago, when we were first discussing this exhibit, Pivotal Points, I knew that we were going to probably have a lot of wall space we're going to have to use because of the size of the maps within this exhibit. When I was laying out the design, I had several different layouts that I used, but I came up with this one that you see in this exhibit. It's a little more formal. I didn't have a lot of design elements within the exhibit itself because I'm letting the maps speak for themselves. They're the stars of this show.
Pivotal Points presents an intimate look at history that invites visitors to spend as much time with a map as they'd like.
As you walk through this exhibit, you'll probably see how it's broken up into sort of a room sort of feeling because of the nature of the storyline throughout this exhibit.
The story begins before there was a city of Littleton or even a state of Colorado. The earliest maps show how little European cartographers really knew about the new lands of America. While the early maps don't state, "Here there be monsters," they do show plenty of terra incognito.
As you walk around for the exhibit, you'll see that some of the maps have extra labels besides the identifying labels that tell you what the pivotal points were and why they are important to the settlement of the Trans-Mississippi West.
From the 16th century into the 19th century, powerful European empires had interests in the New World. The British, Spanish, and French, and later the fledgling United States of America, all relied on explorers to sketch out the details of the lands they controlled. Sometimes their information wasn't the best.
Here's a large inland sea in what is today British Columbia. Where did they come up with that?
This map by Covens and Mortier, 1730, is one of my favorite maps in the exhibit. In 1730, people really did not know what the New World looked like, and so there were all sorts of suppositions, and one of them is that California was an island, and so it does show the state of California unconnected to the mainland, and it's very interesting.
In the 18th century, details of the eastern United States are accurately rendered, and the West Coast is coming into focus for the early mapmakers.
This is one of my favorite walls in the exhibition. It contains some of the early and important maps and pivotal points to Colorado. This little grouping of maps are 5 maps by the mappers Arrowsmith and Lewis, and it shows some of the early ideas of what the United States looked like, and it shows the British possessions in the United States, what the eastern coast looked like, and then a little bit of what is the Louisiana Purchase. And so these are important maps, and they each have a little pivotal point, so there is a large label of explanation.
The early surveyors and cartographers were more than just map makers. They were naturalists and scientists, describing the flora, fauna, geology, and climate information, as well as geographical features. Alexander von Humboldt traveled throughout Spanish America. His 1804 map of New Spain became a must-have for American exploration of the West. Humboldt Peak in southern Colorado is named in his honor. In 1803, the most important real estate deal in U.S. history occurred, the Louisiana Purchase. President Thomas Jefferson was eager to see just what we had bought, so he dispatched Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to explore the new lands. Lewis and Clark mapped navigable waterways, such as the Missouri and Columbia rivers, which would become so important for opening the West to settlement. They also noted the Indian tribes they encountered. The Lewis and Clark map is certainly a pivotal point.
This map is a result of the Lewis and Clark expedition, and it was published in 1814, and it shows the route that was taken by Lewis and Clark as they traveled up the Missouri and mapped things and explored along the way, following the Missouri River, crossing the Rockies, and ending up on the coast of Oregon at the mouth of the Columbia River.
More expeditions followed during the first half of the 19th century, including explorations by Stephen Long, who mapped and climbed Long's Peak in Colorado. J.C. Fremont led 5 expeditions from 1842 to 1853. The maps and accounts of these early explorers fueled the dreams of pioneers who would cross the wide prairies and settle the West to fulfill America's vision of manifest destiny. Perhaps the most well-known explorer in Colorado is Zebulon Pike, for whom Pikes Peak is named. For the record, Pike never actually set foot on the mountain slopes.
And then as we come up along the foothills of the Rockies, we get to the highest peak, which is now named for Captain Pike, and we know it as our Pikes Peak.
Controversy surrounds Zebulon Pike. Was he a lost pathfinder who wandered aimlessly in a circle until the Spanish captured him, or was he a spy? Even today, historians disagree, but it's clear that his expeditions were notoriously poorly equipped, and his men suffered greatly during the Rocky Mountain winters. He was captured by the Spanish and taken to Taos, Santa Fe, and throughout New Spain before he was finally released. Amazingly, his Spanish captors allowed him to take copious notes during his captivity. The early mapping expeditions created some maps that were very accurate and some that had problems. They were limited by the technology of the day.
This 1836 expedition map is very interesting. It's got a lot of precision with respect to latitude, or north-south, and it's kind of vague east-west. It all seems to be based on Lieutenant Steen's estimate of how far they went. I could see him sitting in camp at night asking, "How far do you think we went today?"
Each map in pivotal points contains a history lesson. Take this map of the Republic of Texas. It reveals a Texas-sized ambition stretching from the Rio Grande River, including the established cities of Taos and Santa Fe, and reaching to the Wyoming border, including much of eastern Colorado. How did Texas get its current configuration? It's all about one of the defining issues of the 19th century, slavery. According to the Missouri Compromise of 1820, lands located north of 36.5 degrees of latitude, the southern border of Missouri, could not enter the Union as slaveholding states, so the Texas stovepipe was lopped off. Texas reined in its western borders by 1850 as part of another elaborate compromise as Congress tried to keep the Union intact. Alas, the nation would be embroiled in the Civil War in another decade, but the borders of the Western Territories were taking shape. Gold discoveries in the 1850s put Colorado on the national map, so to speak. While earlier expeditions had labeled Colorado a howling wilderness and decried the lands west of the 100th meridian as the Great American Desert, miners and settlers streamed west. Further mapping expeditions by familiar Colorado names like Wheeler, Hayden, and Gunnison surveyed railroad routes and fleshed out the way west. By 1860, the Western Territories were defined and the current states were becoming recognizable, with a couple of notable exceptions. For example, can you imagine living in Kelowna or the state of Jefferson? The concept of Kelowna never made it out of a congressional committee, but the state of Jefferson was real. The gold regions of Colorado, including Denver, were over 700 miles from the capital of the Kansas Territory, a long, dangerous journey through Indian country. So in 1854, a group of citizens met in Dick Wooten's saloon in Denver and declared themselves a state. Here's what their charter said. Shall it be government of the knife and revolver, or shall we unite in forming here our golden country among the ravines and gulches of the Rocky Mountains and the fertile valleys of the Arkansas and Platte, a new and independent state? Was Jefferson legal? Probably not. Citizens can't just gather in saloons and declare themselves a state, but the march to statehood was unstoppable. President James Buchanan created the Territory of Colorado in February 1861, and in 1866, Congress voted to approve statehood for Colorado. But wait, Colorado is the centennial state, meaning it entered the Union in 1876. Why the delay? President Andrew Johnson had vetoed statehood because of doubts about the viability of Colorado. It was, after all, the Great American Desert. But settlers and lobbyists prevailed. The rest, as they say, is history, and it's clearly documented in the maps of the time.
Parents can engage their children by finding two maps that were published the same year. For instance, this map was published in 1860, and the map next to it was also published in 1860. And then you can have your children compare and contrast the two maps. For instance, in this map, you'll see that Kansas is a large territory, and there is no Colorado. And yet, if you go over to this map, you'll see that Kansas is very specifically defined, and there is the state of Colorado also defined.
The maps illuminate details of Colorado history for students, particularly middle and high schoolers.
This map was made before a lot of people started coming out to Colorado. So take a look at this map, and what do you see that's different from a map we might see today?
There's no Colorado.
There's no Colorado. That's probably the first thing you notice, huh? So what is in the place of Colorado?
Kansas.
Like Kansas.
Can you read that? Kansas
Territory.
Kansas Territory. Very
And
good.
Mexico.
While pivotal points might not be right for very young children, adults find the maps endlessly fascinating.
This military map is really interesting from 1862 during the Civil War. You can clearly see the delineations between the North and the South. The northern states in the green, border slave states in the yellow, and slave states in pink. And you can see where the Confederacy has pushed to the west, claiming mining interests all the way over here to New Mexico and Arizona.
Visitors may enjoy the exhibit at their own pace, perhaps spending time with a favorite map or closely examining a centuries-old rendering of a familiar place or even their hometown. The type can be a bit small, so visitors are invited to check out a magnifying glass
Thank you.
to check out the maps. Visitors of all ages experience their own pivotal points of understanding as they examine the maps.
There's Littleton.
Right there.
Oh, there's Littleton. There's Littleton. Oh,
There's Littleton.
Pivotal points will be on display until October 16, 2011 at the Littleton Museum on South Gallup Street, right across from Bemis Library. The museum is open Tuesday through Sunday, and admission is free. Plan your own exploration of Littleton's history today.